my pleasure to be moderating this morning. My name is Todd Kohlbecker. I'm Senior Managing Director at Cushman and Wakefield, where I have the pleasure of working in our Portfolio Services Center with over 400 dedicated real estate professionals providing services to over 80 different retail clients. Before working in Cushman and Wakefield, I was head of real estate for Claris, formerly known as Brown Shoe Company, the parent company of Famous Footwear. But enough about me. What I'd like to do is turn it over to our panelists, give each of them a couple of minutes, tell us about who they are and their role in the world of real estate. Kambiz, would you like to start?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Kambiz Hemati. I am a creative director of store design or retail design at Verizon. And I started in this new role in February, so I'm still new at the company. And we're working on all kinds of new projects that we'll get into as we move forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Rieger. I'm with H&R Block. I'm Vice President of Real Estate. We have approximately 11,000 locations across the United States, 6,500 of which are company-owned, the balance being franchised. I've been with H&R Block about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I worked in food service, so worked for Dine Equity, which is Applebee's and IHOP restaurants, did some corporate finance, merger and acquisition work, and strategic real estate. So happy to be here.
Good morning, Bill Mitchell. Post the military, I've been in the restaurant business for entirely too long. And most recently with Dunkin Brands. I'm the president of Dunkin Brands. We run, we'll open our 12,000th Dunkin this month and our 20,000th store by February between Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins. Our footprints are vastly different, so I run 2 different development strategies, both for the U.S. and then internationally. So we're faced with a lot of challenges as we grow. Our posted guidance this year is to open between 630 and 660 units worldwide. So we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us with this changing environment.
Good morning. I'm Suk Singh. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Bloomin Brands and also the head of global franchising. I've been there 2.5 years. And Bloomin Brands is Outback, Bonefish, Carrabba's, and Fleming's. Prior to being at Bloomin Brands, I was at Darden for 10 years, where I was the Chief Development Officer there.
Great guys. On the surface, I would say that your portfolios might be viewed as mature, at least mature domestically. If you could talk a little bit about either your domestic portfolio or perhaps your international portfolio, international strategy, how you go about aligning around an international strategy, perhaps some of the challenges that you had, and feel free to sort of debate my comment about being mature domestically too. Bill, would you like to start?
Sure. I think, getting to know these colleagues, we're all having to reinvent ourselves every day. There's a digital technology that, the one thing we talk about constantly is we all sleep with one thing consistently every night in our company, and it's this. So I think this year there's 8.6 billion phones and 7.3 billion people. And so it's changing the way we develop, both internationally and domestically. We're looking at multiple different sizes of formats, and the consumer has changed drastically. We're not focused on the millennials anymore. We're focused on Generation Z, and they're making monumental changes, which I think will affect the footprint, as we scale and move our strategies.
Great. Kambiz?
Well, we don't have international, so well, speaking with everybody here and with my colleagues and with a lot of other people in the industry, and before going, I was at Starbucks and Nike before going to Verizon. And always the conversation is about bringing, devices, bringing technology to the stores, and how do we, tie online with inline. And in my new role at Verizon, that's not really our problem. We have so many devices in the store, and really, it's our job really is to look at our stores and make them more human. So we are already the device company. We have a lot of technology. So the last 6-7 months, what we've been doing, and we have an initiative to completely change our look and feel, the way we show our brand, the way we experience our stores. And we're looking really, in a way, a bit the opposite of what everybody else I think is doing, is that we are already a technology company. How do we make the stores more human? How do we look at how people shop? And as you said, shopping has changed. The new generation is looking at everything very differently. And so how do we physically transform our stores to match some of the shopping experiences, or the main shopping experiences that the younger generation has online and on their devices? And we can get into that as we move forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, will you talk a little bit about your domestic portfolio and your thoughts on how you view that, and then the international piece of your business, how you go about building an international strategy, where H&R Block is in that mission?
Yeah, so domestically, I mean, it's we're within 5 miles of 97% of all Americans for a consumer that effectively uses us one time per year, unless you get an IRS letter, which I hope nobody in this room does. So it's a bit tricky to say, hey, listen, we need a ton of new developments, but there's growing population and we need to serve that need, right? So we look, it's really more of an optimization of market strategies. So going deep dive into markets and saying, where do we need to optimize? Where are there pockets of potential consumers that aren't using our brand that should be, and the only reason that they're not is because we don't have a point of distribution there. So from our standpoint, we are not totally mature, because there's just growing population, growing demand for, as population grows, tax returns and things like that grow. But domestically, I mean, I think it's more of an optimization play for us in our current state. So internationally, it's just tricky for us to grow internationally, because we have to develop tax codes and things like that with different countries. So we do have a strong presence in Canada and Australia, Brazil, India, but we have to meet the consumer's needs much differently in every single one of those. I think the challenge is your brand, internationally, are they going to soak your brand up as an American brand, or do you need to adjust your brand to become relevant internationally? And that can vary country by country. And I think especially this gentleman on my right, they have to figure that out every single country they go into. Now, ours is more, we have to adjust our brand to that country. But there are some American brands that just travel so well that internationally people want to soak them up. So I think that's the challenge you have to face when you're thinking about international expansion.
Great. Suk?
Okay. Excuse me. Well, domestically, I think the casual dining industry is over-restauranted, and I think you see that just with some of the brands that are out there that aren't doing the sales that they should be, but because they've already invested into those buildings and the equipment's in there and the FF&E is in there, they refuse to die. Then some of those brands just need to go away, but they don't. So so that's a problem for the industry overall. However, beyond that, on the Bloomin side, we're spending a lot of time relocating restaurants, because they did really build out back when they built them in the 90s. They built them in tertiary locations, and now we're spending a lot of time relocating those into primary locations. Internationally, we're focusing our equity in a couple of places. One's Brazil, and even though Brazil's a very challenging market to be in right now, we're doing really well in Brazil. Outback's a really strong brand in Brazil. And then beyond that, we're looking at China. And China's really interesting because it's moving so fast, and it's actually kind of, in terms of restaurants and design, it's actually ahead of the US, because they haven't got the legacy of 40 years of building casual dining restaurants. So the challenge in international markets is, how do you become relevant to the local people? So what we're doing in international markets is really doing a lot of consumer research, and not lifting the brand from the States and just putting it there and saying, well, now you have an American brand. We're looking to see what the guest wants, both in terms of design and in terms of food as well. So we're spending a lot of time looking at that.
And domestically, will you speak to change in legislation that could impact the restaurant business?
Yeah, I think the largest or the biggest change that may be coming, depending upon what happens in November, is $15 or $19 minimum wage. And when you have 100 employees in the restaurant, that becomes a challenge. And so if that does happen, and that wages are going to continue to go up, I think we're going to have more and more kind of shifting of of the food prep kind of further up the supply chain, so that there's less and less being done at the restaurant level, because restaurants are going to have to rethink how they think about labor, because otherwise they're just going to fail.
Right.
And get ready for a $40 pizza if $19 wage comes in.
Yeah, I would comment. I think it's domestically one of the toughest spaces in retail we've ever seen. It's not one key issue. I mean, we do talk about minimum wage, and we've got one specific high volume, extremely high volume market that the average store will take a $120,000 cut in EBITDA on a $15 minimum wage. But that's just one of many multiple cuts. If you look at regulatory issues on menu boards, and I saw there were some people in lighting and menu boards here. It's phenomenal the hundreds of millions of dollars that we're spending in our industry to put caloric intake. And it's those deep cuts that eventually have slowed progression and will continue. We're learning internationally. There's already a lot of regulatory pieces in place, but it's really thrown. And for our business, we're 100% franchise, so we're an asset-light model. And it's pretty tough for our franchisees to make the same money today. And when they get into healthcare, they're saying, hey, we don't want more than 50 employees, so let's set up 5 base companies versus 1 base company. So then the focus of that pressure and the cost of doing it. So I think it's a monumental issue that'll shift development over time.
It'll be interesting to watch for sure. Guys, let's shift gears here a little bit and talk about the right store. The right store. What I mean by the right store is it seems like retail has gone from the day of managing to a number of store openings. We're going to open up 55 stores, 150 stores. Every store is going to look and feel the same. These are the markets we're going into. To a conversation around, let's open up the right store. If you give me your definition, your view of what the right store is for you, the conversations that are taking place internally, is there a consensus around the right store? Is there a budget to execute it? And Kambiz, you get the pleasure of going with that one.
No, we don't have any budgets. We can do whatever we want. So, yeah.
Comment.
No, we have a budget, obviously, and we want to keep to it. I think what we're doing, which is something that I had done also when I was at Starbucks, late 2008, 2009, is the idea to completely redo the stores, but keep the same budget. And how do you do that? You start to, dismantle all the pieces of the store and figure which ones are really necessary and which ones are just, you can get rid of. As an example, back in the days, the Starbucks used to have all these crazy ceilings with crazy curves and drywall and lighting and all those things. And nobody cared about those ceilings. So we just got rid of them, and we took the money and then we used it on the counters, on the surfaces where you pick your drink, using real materials instead of just laminates, elevating the touch points of the consumer. And we kept basically the budgets the same. And we went from a non-lead store to a lead store. And we did a lot of those kind of works. And I think, managing budgets is an amazing thing that we have to do. But we also have to elevate the design and the experience. And for me, the most important thing is to elevate whatever it is that we're selling. If it's a drink, if it's a device, a cell phone, how do you elevate it? How do you make that the hero instead of the architecture, instead of the fixture, instead of the graphics? I think a lot of designers are in love with their fixtures and their design works, and they sort of tend to forget that the store is actually a machine to sell. And whatever it is that you're selling, that's the important thing. And for us at Verizon, we're obviously selling a lot of devices, but we're also starting to sell a lot of services, and we're getting into content. And how do you show those items? How do you have your consumers experience those things at the store level? That's really what we're working on right now.
Great. Dan, is there a shared vision about the right store in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably debate site selection and things like that all day long, but that's for another time. So, Kambiz and I were talking last night and talking about store design, and we're telling them kind of the way that we view it is it's really a cohesive partnership amongst a cross-functional group within an organization. If you just have the marketers design an office or a restaurant or anything else, it's you're going to be in trouble. If you have just client experience, if you have just real estate, it's got to be some cross-functional group that says, hey, listen, this is meeting the needs. The other thing that while you're talking, it kind of keyed on me was, the one thing I dislike is remodel programs where you have every 7 years you have a new look, right? Really, there should be a transitional, every year you should be tweaking, kind of like a luxury car. You should be tweaking design so that you never have a old look and a new look. You just have a gradual progression of what your office, restaurant, store design looks like. And you're a heck of a lot more nimble on fitting those consumer needs along the way. But totally agree with what he said, that the step way back and think of it from a consumer standpoint. What does it look like? What should it look like? How are you selling your product? When you walk up to the office, what does it say about your brand? When you're in the office, you don't, marketers and things like that, all they think about is impressions, touch points. Once you're in an office or a store, you know where you are, right? You don't need to be hitting the head with it 100 more times. But then once you're in the product engagement, there should be subtle cues about how you make sure that experience, it's trusted, we'll take care of you from here, and then product placement. So making sure that whatever product you're wanting the consumer to enjoy, you're subtly letting them know that it's available. So that's food for thought.
Bill, I suspect the right store might have a couple of different definitions depending upon which part of the world you're working in. If you'll kind of weave in consumer touch points in that definition and maybe technology, how that's driving the right store in your mind?
Well, I hate a panel that always agrees, but I think the 2 points that were made are critical. I think the difficult point, though, that I'd like to make with Dan's piece is, regardless of the brand, the technology and the consumer interface and the table stakes, exactly right. Anything that this new generation touches has to be perfect. The experience at the counter is a must-do, or it's a game changer. The ability of having one bad experience, or gosh forsake in Chipotle's example, or Usi in China's example, of a foodborne illness can destroy a brand overnight. So this technology piece, this adaptability to what we're doing. So we're rolling new designs. I'll have a brand new one, unfortunately, yet another one that'll roll out in Amsterdam in Q1. And we've been working on that migration on how we catch up. And we consider ourselves a digital leader, and we will be a digital leader in the space. Starbucks has done a nice job, and compliments we're starting to leapfrog their efforts. But with that, you end up with how do you bridge where you were with where the consumer is going? And that's the piece, a dear friend of mine has been trying to get me to come here in the flooring business, and we talked about it last night. And I said, the only thing I would tell you is figure out how your product works in the main part with the core elements, but that has to be adaptable, right? So we have 3 to 4 different designs depending on, the one thing that hasn't changed is real estate cost. It's only gone up, and it's only going to continue to go up. So, we're faced with rents that are, escalating 25 cents on a dollar in some parts of the world. So when you write 25% of your business into a real estate venture or a lease, you've got to figure out how that box works. And in many cases, I'll use this quick example. I was in the pizza business for many years. Domino's domestically is now posting 75% online. And Papa John's, where I was the former president, is about 65%. We used to think we needed C real estate. Then we went to B-A. With 75% of your consumers ordering online, there's no phones ringing. Do you really need an oven, or you just need a storefront? So I think that technology piece, whether domestically or internationally, will continue to evolve how we develop.
You bet.
So,
Suk?
You're up.
Everything they said. No. In terms of design, I think, like I said, China is way ahead of where we are. And the interesting thing happening in China is we built 6 restaurants, and every restaurant has been different because landlords there are demanding that your restaurants not look the same, even though you're a brand. So the restaurant's having to evolve. The design is having to evolve. And I think that's a good thing because it's forcing us to rethink what we're doing in the US, and it's forcing us to rethink how we remodel restaurants. And to your point, the typical thing was you had a design, and then you spent 7 years pumping out that design in your remodeled restaurants. Well, by about year 3, it's already tired, but you're going to be remodeling for another 4 years with that same design. So now we're thinking about it differently, and I'm driving supply chain crazy because I'm like, we're not doing that anymore. And then they're saying, well, you can't have every restaurant be different. And I'm challenging them and saying, why not? Why can't every restaurant be a little different? Why do they all have to be the same? So So I think on that side that that's being challenged. I think on the other side it's size. So the other thing was every restaurant used to be the same size, right?
Right.
It was easy in the US because you had freestanding restaurants, and every Outback was 6,443 square feet, and so you knew where they were, knew how big they were going to be. Well, again, the way people are changing how they eat and how they go out and how they order is changing the way we're designing restaurants and the size of them. So in China, we're building a lot smaller restaurants, only about 150, 160 seats, but it means that you can have more of them in a marketplace as opposed to building these larger restaurants.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bill, I like Suk's comment about some of the international learnings coming back domestically and applying those to the portfolio here. Do you have some examples of that, or is there a receptivity around that strategy, sort of a international test and learn component, and applying it to the portfolio abroad?
Yeah, we're not really good at that yet, but we will be. Yeah, I mean, I go back to Suk's example in China. We've been in China for 19 years, and we failed for 19 years. So 3 years ago, got that terrible phone call on a Sunday morning, and our CEO and dear friend said, Bill, get to China and fix that. My wife said, what'd you do to piss him off? And I closed everything but 4 stores, a couple hundred stores, and we had to redesign. So just recently, I saw our 2 base designs, and there were 12 different fixtures and what it looked like. So I think we're all saying the same thing. Inside the U.S. is absolutely going to continue to go. And I'm in restaurants all around the world that if they were at the corner of Hartford and Hartford, Connecticut, be doing $2.5 million in cash flowing, but they're not. And so I think the evolution of creating big-time consumer touch points, understanding sustainability. We just started talking about sustainability in the U.S. in the last 24 to 36 months, and Europe's been talking about sustainability for 15 to 20 years. A key mistake that we did is we rolled out a beautiful piece of equipment. I have 2 in my home called Turbo Chef. It's great technology with a huge sandwich platform. We just forgot that when you turned it on, it cut down the city power. And it was charging the average licensee about $580 a month to operate something for, 8 sandwiches a week. And so, it's that understanding of how we call today global localization. But most importantly, what we're learning in menu diversification and product offerings, sustainability, fair trade, the things that are truly resonating outside the U.S. are now resonating inside the U.S. And it feels powerful here, but it is truly a break or make decision outside the U.S.
It's an expectation.
If you're not there, you're not getting a visit. And so, again, spending time and money into organic and free trade and products that represent that, and associating yourself with companies that resemble that are ever so critical.
Kambiz, back to you. You were commenting about the in-store technology. I wonder if you give us kind of a peek behind the curtains of some challenges that you're facing. Are there any technologies that you offer or services that just can't be executed in store, and what are your thoughts on making that happen?
No, the technology we have, we have a lot of new products that are coming up. I can't really talk about them, but the company is getting more and more into the Internet of Things, and basically connectivity in all shapes and forms. And our new store concept that we've been working on is going to be, it's going to open the first week of November. So there will be some new ways of displaying things and showing services. But like what you said, it's a work in progress. I always like to do something and then study it and tweak it and tweak it and tweak it and just keep going with it. It's never going to be perfect. So no, I can't really talk about the technology that we're doing right now, but what I can say is that we, going back again to the notion of technology in store, we're looking at it in a way, in a low-tech manner. We think about how people shop online, and how when you go online and you buy a song on iTunes, you buy something and then you look on the side and there are recommendations. You go to Amazon and you look at, you want to purchase something and there are reviews, or recommendations of other products. And this is the way the new generation is used to shopping. And when they go to the store, that's not what they find. When they go to the store, they find a bunch of stuff there, pushy salespeople who, by the way, don't have the information. I mean, when I was at Nike, we did some research, and the younger generation, specifically girls, didn't want anybody to talk to them when they came to the store because they already knew what they wanted. They did the research, they had seen it online, they wanted to come in the store and actually touch it, feel it, try it on, then talk to somebody. They felt because they have the device in their hand, they actually have more information than the salesperson, right? So this is all how retail has to change and evolve. So we're looking at those kind of things. We're looking at how do we match the online experience with the in-store experience? How do you make it easier for people to actually find what they're looking for? Personally, I buy most of my stuff online, and I had to go to Staples just a couple of weeks ago. And you go to Amazon, and then you type, paper clips. And there it is, click, Prime, you get it, right? Now go to Staples, and you look, and it's daunting. Where are the paper clips? There are aisles and aisles and aisles and aisles. You have to walk around. You have to find somebody to help you. Where are the paper clips? It's in aisle 12. And it's the whole experience takes forever. And I forgot how much easier it is to shop online, right? So how do you take that kind of information and how do you apply that to your store? I think that's the challenge of all the retailers. How do you make it easier?
Right. In some ways, many of us have touched on what I would call the new millennial customer. Probably my most overused term is millennial. So let's have a conversation around your vision, your organization's vision, a strategic thought around the next millennial customer. Is there consensus in who she is? Who is she, and how do you go about thinking about her in the future? Bill, you're shaking your head. That means you're going.
I don't know if we have consensus. I started out talking about we're not focused on the millennial. They do make decisions, and we've tried to keep in pace, but it's moved too fast. So our conversations, including 4:30 and 6 o'clock this morning, were around focused on Generation Z, and what does that really look like, and how do we need to be there? I don't usually do a lot of conferences in the last 7, 8 years. I've done 2 this year, and one I found fascinating. Spent a lot of time with the head of Amazon, and the discussion, which I think is relevant here. It's actually shocking, and you'll go home saying, I wish he didn't say that. But the Uberization of life is a real term, and we're looking at developing countries without brick and mortar. Why do we actually have to do it? Because this generation, if you look at all the key statistics, so we used to really focus on 5 touch points of the consumer engagement. Today there are 15. It was the TV, the mechanism, the print, the gift card, all the things that you could do to drive consumer behavior. Today there are 15 steps. We want to wake you up with Dunkin perks. We want to see you on your journey. We can track you through beacon technology before you get there. You can hit the on the go. It'll be ready for you when you walk in or pull up. That's basics today. Yeah. So the number one thing that we're seeing is convenience. Delivery is a new term, crazy enough, been around forever. There are supermarket chains in 7-Eleven, for example, in Japan that are doing 90% of the grocery for the country. Wow. And so it's this ease of access, this how do you get there very quickly. And I think it'll change the dynamics over time. And it's actually scary when you look at that, what Amazon refers to as the last mile. Mm-hmm. And the focus of all the pushers are saying, how do we close that last mile to the consumer? And in some cases, it involves us with brick and mortar. They're still going to have to drive by at shopping season to an Outback or hopefully stop in the morning for a cup of coffee. But it's how you really penetrate long term. Mm-hmm.
Suk, is there consensus around the view of the future consumer?
No.
No.
No. I mean, things are changing so fast, to your point, right? I mean, if you look at the budgets that companies have, 20 years ago, there wasn't technology, right? And now more and more of our budgets are being consumed by technology. So, but it's moving so fast, and then something happens that's game-changing overnight, and everybody has to shift. I mean, what was it, 5 years ago? Uber didn't exist.
Right.
And that's all I use anymore to get anywhere. And It's the same with restaurants. I mean, on the restaurant side, you know, there are on the casual dining side, there are 3 touch points where technology becomes really important. One's wait time, because everybody's time starved. So nobody wants to wait anymore for anything. Unless it's Shake Shack, then you're willing to wait 4 hours.
Today.
Today, right.
That's the first touch point. So people want to get in and they want to get sat down. And the second touch point is, as long as I have a drink, I'm happy, right? So if that first drink gets you to your table really quickly, the guest is happier when they leave. And the third touch point is paying. So you know, it always is your fault when your check doesn't come quick enough. So you know, that last 10 minutes of the experience really impacts whether a guest has a good experience or not. Because if you can get your check, pay and go, one, tables are being turned quicker, but secondly, the guest is leaving with a better impression of the restaurant. So they're the 3 touch points that we're focusing on right now, but I can tell you, you know, in 2 years, that'll change.
It'll change again.
There'll be other things, yeah.
Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, millennials is a tricky thing. People have been trying to solve this for a long time. I mean, I think we're a bit different from a throughput perspective because we do all of our business in 3 months, and then effectively we shut our offices down for 7 months. We have a seasonal workforce. 80,000 people come to work for us, and then they don't work for us for 7 months. So it's tricky in our business because we're in financial services. Some people want help, some people want to do it themselves. Some millennials will come in and they'll actually do their taxes on our H&R Block software sitting in a retail office and then ask a tax professional to check that. We don't do that necessarily today, but should we, right? I mean, we're keeping a very close eye on how is technology changing our industry, and especially in that millennial age. And people go through cycles. You know, they're millennials today, and I guess they always will be, but their age will change, and how do their needs change, and you want to capture them now from a branding perspective. We're here, we trust you, we'll be here 20 years from now. Should you ever need us, you may want to do your taxes by yourself now, but 20 years from now, when you have a kid and a business and a farm and everything else, you know, then we're here to help. So, I think it's part serving people the way they want to be served today, but then having the availability of how they want to be served as they meander through their progression of life. So.
Yeah. Kambiz is certainly a changing consumer in the world that you live in. We speak to what she looks like in the future, and is there a common consensus at the organization around what she looks like, how she shops, how she interacts with your store?
Yes, we're all aligned at the, we thought about it a lot, and we thought, well, different groups, different ages, and then we spoke to a bunch of people, and really, for us, the consensus was that we have to design for whatever the newest generation is, and everybody else is going to follow. And I think to us, that's the way we're doing it. We're really, and everything that everybody said is true for us as well. We need to cut the wait times. We need to make the experience much more easy. We need to make sure the information is available. So yeah, I mean that's where we are. We all, I think, have the same issue that we have to resolve. I mean, look, nobody likes Verizon, nobody likes Sprint, nobody likes T-Mobile, nobody, So we obviously have it's a sort of, we have an image issue, but and part of that has to do with the fact that it takes time at the store. People go right now to Verizon just when they need to upgrade their phones or if there's a problem with their phones. But we have over 130 million customers. So we feel there are many ways we can leverage the amount of consumers that we have and actually, sell them other products. So those are the things that we think about right now.
Great. Guys, we've got about 10 more minutes here. So I just wanted to ask kind of an open-ended question. If you would give us a peek behind the curtains, if you would, for a second, and can answer this question. And the question is, what are you thinking about that nobody else is? What's driving your everyday? What's prompting you to get up for that 4:30 a.m. conference call this morning, Bill? What are you thinking about that nobody else is? To the extent that you can share with the audience, I'm interested in hearing what's driving that very strategic conversation behind the scenes at your organization. Suk?
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
We're all public companies up here.
All publicly traded companies, this will be interesting.
No,
What can you share? How's that?
Okay. So I think where we're focusing, where other people aren't, is in the international marketplace, because there's another 6 billion people out there that we haven't even thought about as customers or guests. So we're focusing our energies on certain markets on the domestic side, and then on the franchising side, we're looking kind of at the right partners globally in terms of who to go with. So that's how we're kind of focusing our energies kind of going forward in terms of development. And there's everybody's kind of getting there slowly, but I think we're really focusing on that in terms of growing the company, because the domestic market is over-restauranted and it's just not going to grow that fast anymore.
Right. Do you see a shake-up in the domestic business?
Like I said, I think the challenge with the restaurant industry is you have these zombie restaurants that sales keep on slipping and going further down, but as long as they're cash flowing, companies are going to keep them open.
Yeah.
So they'll be at some point they'll be forced to close, but it's going to be that last gasp thing. And everybody's aware there's restaurant companies out there today that aren't doing well, but they've kind of struggled along for years, and all of a sudden, I think in the last 4 weeks, 3 restaurant companies have gone bankrupt. And so I think as minimum wage and other things kind of hit us, that they are going to go away, and it's going to speed up, I think, in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Thanks. Bill?
I don't know if we're working on anything that our competitors are not. I think a lot of the retailers are reading from the same tea leaves, and we're all doing it. We're saying, talk about technology investment. Next to that is consumer investment. So we spend a lot of money trying to understand the retail consumer, and so I think the key stakes is where you place your emphasis. We've learned by developing Europe that we have to have a different strategy. I think as we look outside the U.S., we mentioned Brazil. Traumatic in politics and currency devaluation, but a very, very healthy environment for our space. And so I think it's really, internationally for us, we opened up 7 countries this year, and I stopped development, and we're still going to open up 5 this year. And I think it's picking the right spots. What in Africa is truly ripe for a consumer, and how do you enter that space? It's no longer able to take a concept, any of our concepts, and enter the space as it was. So you have to adapt that space. But underneath our hood, again, we pretty much lay it out there for the analyst is, we're going to continue to develop, we're going to get smarter, technology is going to be primary key for us, and then just do it in a smart manner. And it doesn't necessarily mean, and it's not bad for the retail segment, there are many countries that I have on my slate that we'll occupy, but we'll occupy through a different way. And we have to get smart about that when the unit level economics don't work, or currency devaluations, or we just recently had a 46% currency devaluation in Georgia, and the country, not the state, hopefully. But that'll shock you. And 30% devaluations are not uncommon today. So to have that happen, and you own a pretty large restaurant, it's pretty shocking, not to mention the input. So our strategy is just to develop and get the product in the consumer's hands however we need to, including what's being talked about now as drone technology.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Dan?
I think it's the same thing that these guys talked about. It's that bridging of the digital versus retail marketplace. That's something I think everybody in this room probably has on their mind in some level. It's making sure that the consumer who wants to be digitally enhanced can do so in that physical location, and that is a really, really tricky thing to figure out, because as you pointed out, some people just don't want to be touched. Leave me alone. I got this, right? Well, how do you still serve that consumer and give them value and actually capitalize on that value. And bridging that gap's tough. I mean, we see it in our industry as much as anybody else. But and then it becomes another thing, which I think is kind of something that I was thinking about when you guys were talking, is you know, as you're optimizing your real estate portfolio or your physical locations, your retail spaces, if you will, what do you do with some of the, where do you focus your efforts? Do you focus them on the low end, some of the underperformers? Everybody has a portfolio that does high end and low end. So where do you focus your efforts? Do you try to fix some of the dogs? Do you reinvest more on your high end things? And I think that's something that, you know, I'll probably pick these guys' ears on after this panel and say, you know, what do you do with your dogs? I read an article a long time ago. It was like they called it the dogs. Everybody has them, right? So what do you do with them? Do you focus more, or do you just try to consolidate and lose a point of presence? And as a retail organization, it's kind of tough to justify that, but you know, that's what we struggle with. That's what we think about, is how are we continually optimizing our retail portfolio to making sure that we're meeting the consumer's needs, both externally, a number of physical locations, but internally as far as technology goes. So that's what we're thinking about.
Kambiz, what are you thinking about that nobody else is?
I think that for me, as a designer, I think design is a very powerful weapon to use. I think it's what's going to make or break the next generation of retail stores. I think it's about the storytelling. It's about localization, which we talked about. You know, and you know, making a store local is not that easy. It's you know, you can't, you know, you go to Paris and you put a picture of the Eiffel Tower on the wall. That's not making the store local, right?
Bad mistake.
People see through that stuff. Younger people see through that. Everybody talks about being authentic. Nobody does it really right. So it's in small details. It's in being, you know, respectful of other people, other people's cultures, other people's, you know, way of life. We did a lot of that study when I was at Starbucks. How do you make the stores local? How do you make a store for France? How do you make a store for Taiwan? How do you make a store for Korea? And when you start to look at it, every one of those markets, they use the store differently, right? You know, in Korea, many people go on a date to Starbucks. In America, we don't go on a date to Starbucks. You know, we grab and go. You know, in France, women like to go to Starbucks because they get more space, they get a clean environment, they're not bothered by some guy with a cigarette who's trying to pick up on them. How, you know, every country is different, everywhere is different, and I think that design is very powerful in solving some of the situations, in being, you know, telling good stories in small, again, details. You know, when I was at Nike, for example, we did stores in China, and we didn't just put Chinese things on the wall and, you know, whatever, but we took materials that were specifically Chinese. So what we did is we went and we looked at all of the gymnasiums in China, all the high school gymnasiums, right? And we looked at what materials you know, those buildings were made out of. You know, in the U.S., you use red bricks. In China, the bricks are actually gray. They didn't have red bricks. So how do you take then those elements and use them in the store? So it's a sort of a nod to their culture. It's saying, okay, we know we're American, we're from America. You like us because we're American, but at the same time, we understand you, we understand your culture, and we're respectful of your culture. And look, and you may not see it the first time you go in the store. You may see it the third time you go in the store, but you're like, oh, I get it. They took elements of the architecture and stories and the traditions of our culture and used it in their store. So I'm not sure if it answers the question, but I think those are the little things that I think we need to be more sensitive to.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. If you will join me in showing some appreciation for our panelists. Thanks, guys. Thank you.